Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Over the summer, you know that I like to talk about some history, some of the past of Purdue sports, because I'm a complete nerd. Sports history is one of my great passions in life. So today what we're going to do, we've got a little bit of a lack of news still, not a whole lot going on the news front as it relates to Purdue football and basketball. So we are going to look at the last decade and pull 10 of the most memorable games of this decade for Purdue basketball. You know, I don't want to call it the best wins because that's kind of hard to do, but just looking at these seasons, 10 games that really stand out as particularly memorable. This has been quite possibly the most successful decade in the history of Purdue basketball if you look at just a 10-year run from 2017 to 2026. It's been a really, really nice run. A lot of really positive things, and Purdue getting probably as much love and national appreciation as the program ever has. So there are going to be games that aren't on this list that were awesome, that are iconic, that are memorable, but we're going to go in chronological order here. Top 10, so to speak, games from the past decade. If you don't, be sure you're following on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. We're talking all things Purdue sports all summer long. Send in stuff you want me to talk about on the show. Questions, comments, episode ideas. Do it on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode here, because we're going to be coming at you all summer with lots of Purdue sports talk. But, you know, for reference on this, I was in college for 4 of these years. This goes from my senior year of high school to now. I've been pretty dialed into this long before that, you know, really going back to the baby Boilers era. I can count on a couple of hands the number of games I haven't watched. So we're going to just go in chronological order, and we'll start back in 2017 in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Purdue 80, Iowa State 76. It's hard making these lists because NCAA tournament games always mean a little bit more. They are the pinnacle of the sport of college basketball. So much of how seasons are remembered comes down to what happens in the NCAA tournament. I think it's probably a little bit of a problem for college basketball when you look at perception, but this was kind of it all coming together for Purdue from its revival after a really down stretch. You look back at Purdue in the mid-2010s when it finished last in the conference in 2014. 2013 was a team that went to the CBI and lost in the second round of that. Then Purdue has a couple of solid years that end in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But this is the season where Caleb Swanigan becomes a first-team All-American, a household name in the sport. Just a wonderful story that season. This was Purdue winning the Big Ten title in the regular season for the first time in a few years, about a handful of years or so, going back to 2010. It was a really, really good season for Purdue, and Purdue gets off to a great start in this game. Purdue's up by 19 with 14 minutes to go, but as is always the case in the NCAA tournament, the other team doesn't go down quietly. Iowa State battles back. It's a game down the stretch, but Caleb Swanigan gets an offensive rebound off of a missed free throw, gets the ball out to P.J. Thompson, who knocks down 2 free throws that seal the deal for Purdue. It got Purdue back to the Sweet 16. Purdue hadn't been to the Sweet 16 in 7 years. It had lost in the round of 32, back to VCU in 2011, to Kansas in 2012, and then first round exits to Cincinnati in 15, Little Rock in 16. This was a really big deal. We talk about it every year in the NCAA tournament. The difference between the round of 32 and the Sweet 16 is massive in terms of public perception, in terms of how you remember a season. This was really big for Purdue, and being able to hold on to win that game, to get an extra week of positive stuff. This was a Saturday night game up in Milwaukee, I believe. A really, really big win for Purdue. And that season was the springboard for everything that's come since then. You look at the star players. Caleb Swanigan wasn't the first star of Purdue basketball by any means, but really since then, you can only count a year or two that Purdue hasn't had a bona fide star player on its team. You look at NCAA tournament runs, getting to the Sweet 16. That was the start of 3 straight trips to the Sweet 16, and then Purdue does it again in 22, 24, 25, 26. Really, really good run for Purdue has kind of started because of that season. And what Purdue started that season led into the following year when Purdue was better than anyone thought. I think Purdue was a fringe top 25 team to start that year. It got a lot back, but it didn't get Caleb Swanigan back. And that was the big question mark, was how Purdue would fare without Caleb Swanigan. And it leads me to an awesome game. One of the better games I've watched was January 25th of 2018, Purdue 92, Michigan 88 inside Mackey Arena. A really, really high-level basketball game. That season, Purdue played Michigan 3 times. Purdue won both of the regular season games. It won up in Ann Arbor. It won this game in Mackey Arena. And then they played in the Big Ten tournament final at Madison Square Garden, and Michigan won that one in fairly decisive fashion. But my memory of this game was watching Vince Edwards and Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman just going back and forth, shot after shot, haymaker after haymaker. This was an awesome Michigan team. This was that Michigan team that made it to the national title game. It played Villanova there. That was a great run for Michigan. Jordan Poole hit that bomb in the second round to beat Houston. Michigan almost went home in the round of 32, but Jordan Poole hit a half quarter or so just inside half court. Michigan goes to the title game. Really good team. John Beeline's Michigan teams, man. You go back and you really think about it. Those were some really, really good teams year in, year out. He did a fantastic job there. Probably a little underappreciated as we look back on that. Really good run he had. Really fun game, though. This game was awesome. This was high-level basketball, high-level scoring. Isaac Haas was super efficient in this game, and Purdue shot the ball well around him. And it was Purdue really mastering the offensive style of having a giant in the middle who was a really nice post scorer and surrounding him by shooters everywhere, because that's what that Purdue team had. Everyone else on the floor, aside from Nogel Eastern, was a capable shooter. And when Matt Harms was in the game, it's not like he was stepping out and shooting that year, but he did some good things. He had a really nice redshirt freshman year that season. That was a really good Purdue team. It's unfortunate that Purdue team didn't get to maybe get a proper NCAA tournament result when Isaac Haas broke his elbow in the Cal State Fullerton game in the first round. It got past Butler, and that's a game that could really be on this list because you were able to survive that. A Butler team that, frankly, Purdue handled pretty easily in the regular season in the Crossroads Classic, but Jaquil Taylor's thrown into the fire, and that was kind of crazy. But this game, man, a really, really good one, and it was Purdue in the middle of a 19-game winning streak that came out of nowhere, right? Because that win streak started with Purdue and Arizona playing in the 7th place game in the Battle for Atlantis after Purdue had lost to Tennessee and Western Kentucky in back-to-back days. That was Arizona with DeAndre Ayton. Purdue wins that game comfortably and then rips off 19 in a row and got as high as number 3 in the AP poll. A really fun season, and I think this Michigan game was probably, as I look back on it at least, the highlight game of that season. You know, the following year was interesting. I'm looking at schedules, right? I'm looking at what happened, and the 2019 Purdue team did it without a ton of like crazy memorable games. There was Purdue stealing one at Nebraska where Grady Eifert threw one in off of a blocked shot, I think, that was really strange. But that season didn't have a ton of like all-timers, unless you want to consider Matt Harms tipping in a shot to win 48-46 in Bloomington an all-timer. It's probably an all-timer, but not for the right reasons. But the Sweet 16 game certainly delivered. Purdue 99, Tennessee 94 in the Sweet 16, and this is an all-time game, right? Everyone remembers this as the Ryan Klein game. He knocks down 7 threes. Klein has 27. Carson Edwards has 29. You could probably win some money if you're sitting at a bar with a bunch of Purdue guys and ask who the leading scorer is from that game. I bet 9 out of 10 people would tell you it was Ryan Klein. It was not. It was Carson Edwards. But Purdue had kind of had a ceiling in the Sweet 16. When you look at what Purdue did in the Baby Boilers era, it didn't get past the Sweet 16. Robbie Hummel getting hurt twice had a lot to do with that. And then the previous 2 seasons, Purdue gets knocked out in the Sweet 16 by Kansas in 2017 and Texas Tech in 2018 without Isaac Haas. This one, Purdue finally broke through a little bit. It was a wild game. Purdue gets off to a tremendous start. Tennessee responds big time to where you really thought Tennessee was going to win. Purdue got up by 18. Tennessee took the lead with 5 minutes to go. And then Ryan Klein just goes Superman and cements his place in Purdue history. He had a really good senior season. This team was fascinating, man. It was fascinating. That was the ultimate. The sum of the parts is greater than the individual pieces, because Carson Edwards was a great individual piece. Ryan Klein did a lot of really good things. No-Gel Eastern was a perfect fit for that team. The way he defended, the way he moved the basketball. Matt Harms was a nice big man for that team. The way he was able to set screens and roll and move. It worked out well. It was a really good team. It was kind of the perfect encapsulation, though, in that single game, because Klein and Edwards both go off, right? But there are other contributions that go unnoticed. Like in this game, Matt Harms and No-Gel Eastern each have 12 points. It's not an all-time scoring record or anything, but you get 24 from those two, and that really helps. Purdue was great. Purdue was awesome in that game, and that was a really good Tennessee team. Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield. That was a really, really solid team, and Purdue was able to get it done in just a memorable one, a really, really memorable game. And of course, it almost got Purdue to the Final Four. We know how it all ended 2 days later there in the KFC Yum Center, but just an iconic game. Purdue over Tennessee in the Sweet 16. If I asked a bunch of people to do a list like this, there's one game that I have that I don't know would show up on anyone else's, but it came on February 8th of 2020. Purdue 74, Indiana 62 down in Bloomington. This is one that will always stick with me. It wasn't a great game. It didn't have any major implications, but the beauty of college sports is that on any given day, there is a game that means a ton to a group of people. Maybe sometimes it's just something small, but in this one, this meant everything for a lot of people, because this was when Bob Knight returned to Assembly Hall for the first time since he was fired in September of 2000. And I am a huge, I'm kind of a sports history nerd, but being from Indiana, being really into high school basketball growing up and loving the tradition that is Indiana high school basketball and basketball in this state, I grew up hearing all about the Bob Knight years. I grew up hearing all about the Gene Cady Bob Knight battles, but I'm not old enough to have lived it. I'm not old enough to have remembered it. But by this time in life, I'd read A Season on the Brink. I had watched the ESPN 30 for 30 about Bob Knight. I've lived with my parents who hated Bob Knight. I came to really I don't know if respect is the right word, but have an appreciation for everything that he was and everything that Indiana basketball was under him, and to have a good feel on that. Purdue wins this game, and it just moved it to 14-10 overall, 7-6 in Big Ten play. It wasn't crazy, but Purdue goes down there and gets that win and spoils the day for Bob Knight, for a ton of former IU players that were back for that. I remember sitting at my fraternity house with a buddy of mine, and we were looking earlier, a few weeks ahead of that, because we'd always said, we want to go down there and see Purdue win. And we actually went together this year to the Purdue IU game in Bloomington that Purdue did not win. But we didn't go. We didn't. Purdue wasn't playing well. Didn't really want to go see Purdue lose. And then a couple days later, it gets announced that Bob Knight was going to return, and I mean, tickets were $300 or $400 just to get in the door. It was crazy. The demand was through the roof, as it should have been. Just an incredible moment for Purdue fans, but it was awesome to see Purdue go down there and win that game. And then Matt Harms delivers a great quote in the post-game press conference when he gets asked about Bob Knight and all of that, and he basically says, it's great and all, but we have our legend right here, talking about Gene Cady. Harms is a funny guy, man. Real funny guy. Kind of fitting that he went 3-0 down there as a player, but they didn't like him. They didn't like him at all. But that was a really cool win for Purdue, and just one of those games that is never going to be remembered as some like all-time classic, but for what it meant for a lot of people and for Purdue to ruin that against your biggest rival, that's a pretty sweet one. We'll skip forward here to November of 2021. Purdue 80, Villanova 74 in the Mohegan Sun MTE. And this is another one where it's not as much the win itself as it is what it meant for Purdue. On paper going into that year, it was going to be a really good Purdue team. That team the year before had really overachieved a little bit. It got a 4 seed, finished the season really strong when Jaden Ivey was fully healthy as a freshman. Dropped to North Texas, but Purdue's a preseason top 10 team coming into the next year. And the MTE at Mohegan Sun was really big time. Purdue got UNC in the first game, and then it got Villanova. I don't remember who the other team was in that event, but it was big time. It was a really big event. And Purdue gets by UNC on Saturday, a great Purdue sports day. That was the day that Purdue football went up to Wrigley Field and beat Northwestern. Cool atmosphere that was. And then basketball wins against UNC to set up this Villanova game. And this was Jay Wright's Villanova. This was one of the best programs in America at that time. This team ended up making the Final Four. And if I remember right, this was Jay Wright's last year. He retired after this. Colin Gillespie was a great college basketball player for Villanova. And it looked like Villanova was going to win this thing. Villanova gets up by 11 in the second half, but Purdue came roaring back, wins this thing. Zach Edey scores 21. He had a really big game as a sophomore. Isaiah Thompson hit 4 threes in this game. He was playing really well early on that year before he got hurt against Iowa. He got knocked to the ground and got dinged up of some sort, and he wasn't the same after that season. But before that, he was playing really well. He was phenomenal in that game. Caleb First goes 5 for 5 from the floor for 12 points, knocks down a big 3, as I seem to recall. Really, really great win for Purdue. And this was a big deal because it set up Purdue becoming ranked number 1 for the first time in program history. It wasn't the next week. It was a couple weeks later that Purdue got up to number 1. And yes, it was very short-lived. Ron Harper Jr. throws in a half quarter to beat Purdue at Rutgers. But that was a big deal. Doing that for the first time in program history was a really big deal. And Purdue winning that game against Villanova was kind of the peak of that season, right? the rest of the season felt underwhelming. Although when I looked back, Purdue went like 25-6 in the regular season that year. It was better than I seem to remember, but it lost a bunch of close games in Big Ten play that cost it the regular season Big Ten title, and then it loses the Big Ten tournament title game to Iowa, and then it loses to St. Peter's in the Sweet 16. It was a little bit underwhelming of a finish to that year, but at the time, this win against Villanova was a really big deal. It helped really establish Purdue as a national contender that year and put Purdue in a really good spot in the public view that, frankly, Purdue has never really looked back from. All right, real quick, before we get back to the show, if you're a fan of the podcast, you already know I am an insurance agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance. When I'm not talking about Purdue sports, I'm helping people around Indiana get better insurance coverage. Most people are either overpaying or undercovered. A lot of times, it's both. I'll take a look at what you've got, walk you through it in plain English, and help you find something that actually fits your life. Whether it's home, auto, business, life insurance, no pressure, no sales pitch, just a quick free quote and some honest advice. Worst case, you learn something, we'll talk some Purdue sports. Best case, you'll save some money and get better coverage. Give me a call, 317-846-5861, or email me, jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com. You know, the next one is just PK85, that the event the following season. Purdue's been the MTE machine. It hasn't lost an MTE game in forever now, since 2020, November of 2020. But this was perhaps the most shocking result, in a good way, in Purdue basketball that I can remember in my life. Purdue wins 80-68 over West Virginia, 84-66 over Gonzaga, 75-56 over Duke. And this was the last time, you're going to get it again this year, that Purdue went into a season with more questions than answers. Because for the most part, Purdue's been a very known commodity in recent years. Coming into that season, we knew what Zach Edey was to a degree, but you didn't know how he would be as your every possession big man. He'd split minutes with Travion Williams, had a nice freshman to sophomore year jump, but you were waiting on that next one, right? You were waiting on that next leap, and boy, did he do it. You had no idea that he was going to jump into the National Player of the Year race, but that's exactly what he did. It was awesome. And I remember recording the podcast to preview PK85. I remember doing that before I left my house to go to my parents for Thanksgiving, because this was over Thanksgiving time. And I just had said, you need Purdue to win against West Virginia because that would set up Gonzaga. I think the alternative was like Portland State or something, and you didn't really want to do that. You really wanted to go out and get as many big-time games as you can. That's part of the goal of these MTEs. Instead, Purdue did more than just beat West Virginia. It wins 3. It catapults itself towards being number 1 in the country. I don't remember if it got Purdue to number 1 that next week, but it was right around it. And this was your notice that Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer were absolutely good enough to play at a really high level right away. Because Purdue rolled into that tournament with those 2 freshmen as starting guards. You didn't really know much else. And Braden Smith was probably the second best player in that entire event behind Zach Edey. Against Duke, in the championship game, Fletcher Loyer drops 18 points. It was a notice that those 2 were for real, that those 2 were good enough to help Purdue win at a really high level that season. And Purdue ends up winning the Big Ten title. That run, though, it turned everything you thought about that season and flipped it upside down. It was an off-ramp from, we're going to have a good year. Let's go see how it goes. Go team, yada, yada. No, this was, oh, wow. This team is really, really good. This team is legit. That was a really big deal. Really, really impressive run out there. And again, I think a lot of where I come from on this list is the stuff that really gets Purdue in the national conversation, and Purdue was the centerpiece of it coming out of that. That MTE weekend is always really big, and Purdue was the story. Going out there and winning the PK 85 in really comfortable fashion. It was remarkably impressive. That season then set up just the fever pitch of the 24 season that Purdue delivered upon, where Purdue had a really good team the year before. It wins the Big Ten regular season by 3 games. It wins the Big Ten tournament, and then it all comes to an end. It loses to FDU. Purdue gets everything back pretty much from that team. It adds Lance Jones, and it was go time. Purdue 92, Arizona 84 on my birthday in 2023 in the Indy Classic. Arizona was number 1 in the country. It was an awesome atmosphere in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I remember the Colts had a home game that day as well, and downtown Indy was awesome. It was an incredible pregame scene, being at the District Tap beforehand. It was a great scene, buzzing downtown. And Purdue, Arizona was a big-time showdown. Fletcher Lawyer has 27, Braden Smith 26, Zach Edey 22. Purdue gets a win over the number 1 team in the country, and I think that put Purdue back at number 1. I don't know. I'm not good at remembering the AP poll stuff because I don't really care about it. I'm more of a Ken Pom, Torvik type guy than I am an AP poll guy. Everything about that season, though, was a pressure cooker, and Purdue handled it so well. This was a big game. Earlier this month, 2 weeks before, Purdue had lost at Northwestern, but then it had gone up and won against Alabama up in Toronto. That was another awesome game that could have easily been on this list. That season had a lot of them. Those two were great. Winning at Illinois was a really big win. There were some really good games that year. The MTE beating Marquette, Tennessee, Gonzaga out in Hawaii. But I'll go with this one. It reminded you that Purdue, even though Zach Edey won the National Player of the Year, that Purdue team was a lot more than just Zach Edey. Fletcher Lawyer has 27. The stupid narrative that continued for way too long that he couldn't do it against good teams. It should have died the year before when he had 18 against Duke, I guess, but this was awesome, right? This was a great performance. He was incredible. Braden Smith was awesome. Braden Smith was great in this game, and he had just had an awesome game as well up in Toronto against Alabama. He was great there. And of course, Zach Edey. A fantastic showing. Just a great showing for those guys. A really memorable atmosphere. That Gainbridge Fieldhouse was buzzing. I'm not a fan of neutral site games, and I've been at Gainbridge for some more tepid Purdue games where it's not as much of a crazy atmosphere. This was a big-time one. This was a really good one. And it, was just Purdue handling business against a really good team. And then we'll skip ahead to, of course, probably the most iconic win of the last decade. Purdue 72, Tennessee 66 in the Elite Eight in Little Caesars Arena on Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday of 2024. Is Rob Blackman hit the famous line on Resurrection Sunday, Purdue turns the doubters into believers. Believe this, Purdue's going to the Final Four. Great call by Rob Blackman there, but just such a cathartic, iconic moment for Purdue fans. It was a great example of Zach Edey's dominance, probably his best game in college. 40 points, 16 rebounds. Tennessee had no answers, just no answers for him at all. Rick Barnes was not thrilled. I guess he's still not thrilled because he was on a podcast complaining about Zach Edey again recently. But, this game too, I remember Purdue falling down in the first half. Purdue was down 9 or 11, one of the two, and comes roaring back to, I believe, lead at halftime. I think Purdue was up 2, and then Tennessee's in there. Tennessee's in it. Lance Jones hits a huge three to help Purdue pull away late. It is the defining Lance Jones moment. Just the perfect player at the perfect time. He gave Purdue what it missed the previous season. That I hate using the term held it back, but that was a big contributor in Purdue not making it deep into the NCAA tournament. He was huge. And Purdue does this to get to the Final Four for the first time in 44 years. You have Robbie Hummel choking up on the national radio broadcast after the game. Rob Blackman's sign-off of the Purdue radio broadcast was great, listing off folks who weren't around to see Purdue get back to the Final Four. I still have that saved on my phone. Just an incredible day for Purdue fans. And I was there. I was in Detroit. I was part of it. It was an unreal Purdue crowd. I remember getting lunch before it. My goodness, just the Purdue takeover there was crazy. This is the game that defines it. You know, the Final Four game against NC State just wasn't a very good basketball game, right? Purdue didn't play very well, yet it rolled past NC State. It was NC State completely running out of gas and just reminding you why it was a team that wouldn't have made the tournament had it not won the ACC tournament. You know, it is what it is, right? You play the games, but all-timer, man. All-timer. Purdue gets that win, gets to the Final Four. Nothing beats that on this list at all. You know, I'll skip ahead a little bit to, well, I guess in real time, like 5 games of Purdue's. But in November of 2024, Purdue 87, Alabama 78 in Mackey Arena. Kind of the last big-time Mackey moment I can remember of Purdue just winning a game that maybe it shouldn't have. And you haven't seen that in a while because Purdue's been so good. But I think Purdue was an underdog in this game. If not, it was right around a pick 'em. This was a really good Alabama team. Top 10 in the country, maybe top 5. Mark Sears, LeBaron Philon, the kid who just got arrested for all the drugs down there. Charles Bediako was gone, I think, and then he came back. But this is a big-time Alabama team. Grant Nelson was there. He had a big dunk, I think. This was a big game on a Friday night in Mackey Arena, and it was at a time where Purdue football was terrible. So folks were very, very ready for basketball season. And Purdue kind of handles it. Purdue gets this game, wins it. You knew this team could be really good at that point. CJ Cox splashes 3 threes in a row, kind of his coming out party. An awesome win. Braden Smith was really good. Trey Kaufman-Renn was great. And then Nate Oates after the game said they didn't really prepare for Trey Kaufman-Renn. That was a curious one that never quite made sense, but a huge game. Huge game for Purdue. A great moment in Mackey Arena. When CJ Cox hit those threes, man, it was a jet engine in there about to take off. That season didn't have an abundance of like crazy memorable ones. Boat racing Michigan at Mackey that year was pretty cool. I'd give that a Mackey moment too. But beating Alabama, really, really big one that, again, on a national scale, Purdue says, hey, we're still here. We don't have Zach Edey anymore. We're still a really good basketball team. And then we'll close it out with 5 games ago for Purdue basketball. Purdue 80, Michigan 72. March 15th of 2026 in the Big Ten tournament up in Chicago. A great performance from Purdue. Just a great, great performance. Michigan was awesome, right? Michigan won the national title. Michigan was a great team. It won the Big Ten title comfortably. And Purdue gets this win. It gets it done to win a Big Ten title. And it's what you remember from this season. It's a pretty complicated season, one that we've talked about in pretty good detail here, where Purdue was preseason number 1 in the country. It lost many more games in the regular season than you would have thought. But when all was said and done, Purdue still had a pretty strong year. And this game's a big reason why you look back in a really positive manner. At the time, no one knew that Michigan would win the title, but you knew Michigan was really good. And you saw what Michigan did at Mackey Arena a month and a half earlier, where Michigan was up 20 in the first half. Purdue got rolled. Purdue went into the Big Ten tournament with no momentum. It lost home games to Wisconsin, Michigan State down the stretch. We had Jeff Shanley on, and I think he brought up a couple weeks ago, that Purdue lost 4 of its last 6 games or something. I'm pulling it up on my phone here. I can't remember, but Purdue didn't go into the Big Ten tournament playing well. And yes, it was 4 of its last 6 games that Purdue lost. And then Purdue gets all the momentum in the world. It was a real, kind of a real 180. It cruises past Northwestern. It pounds Nebraska. Purdue hangs on against UCLA, and then it does this against Michigan. Purdue turns the ball over twice. Braden Smith's playing half the game wearing number 41. Oscar Clough had 21. It's funny. You look back at stuff that you just don't remember. I don't remember Clough scoring 21 in that game. That might have been his career high at Purdue. I don't know if he ever scored more. But Braden Smith posts a stat line of 14 points, 5 boards, 11 assists, 3 steals, 0 turnovers. That doesn't suck. That is not bad. This is what everyone hoped to get from Purdue all season. Terrific offensive execution. The Big Ten tournament is what it is, but in a situation like Purdue's where your regular season's a little bit underwhelming, where it's not what you wanted it to be, it gives you a chance to go win a championship and add a quality accomplishment to your season's Wikipedia page. And that's exactly what Purdue did. I think the Michigan factor of this is part of it too. This was not a Michigan team that was particularly liked or respected by a lot of Big Ten fan bases, right or wrong. Purdue and Michigan were 2 teams built in 2 very different ways. Matt Painter and Dusty May are 2 coaches who have very different approaches to roster building and program management. And I think seeing Purdue win that game, the way that Purdue has built its program, winning out in that game, probably gave Purdue folks a lot of satisfaction. More so than just winning the game that was already great, right? That was phenomenal. It paves the road for Purdue to get a 2 seed, a favorable path to the Elite Eight, just a big one, a big one for Purdue to win. And ultimately, the next time you walk into Mackey Arena, there's going to be an extra banner in there because of it. You know, as I said, there are plenty of other games that could have been mentioned in here. Maybe this summer, if we hit a real dry spell, I'll do a part 2, because I could easily come up with 10 more from this stretch to talk about. But you know, these are some of the more memorable ones. Just a great run that it's been for Purdue basketball. It really has been. This has been a wonderful stretch, and you know, it's been fun. With 6 of those seasons, we've had this podcast here to talk about it. So I appreciate you all listening. Thank you for spending your time with me. I hope you are all doing well here. We'll be back, should be next week. I've got a lot of travel coming up here, but as news breaks in the Purdue basketball world, we'll have episodes breaking it down. We've got some guests scheduled to come on this summer that I'm really excited about. And yeah, it's going to be a good year. Be sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcasts. Follow on Twitter @BoilersBeyond. And always feel free to reach out there on Twitter. Email boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Until then, guys, take care, and we'll talk again soon.